Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we have a good one for you guys today. We're going over the NHL Trade Deadline, buyers and sellers going into this year's deadline. We're going to be separating the conferences. We'll do the Eastern Conference, then the Western Conference, and we're going to go over the buyers, the sellers, and teams that are going to stay more toward the middle, which I think is the more dangerous spot. But we'll go over all of that. The guys that are buyers, what are they looking to get? Who are they in particular linked to? For the sellers, kind of the opposite. Who are they looking to trade? What's their mindset? So we're going to go over that as well. So let's start off in the Eastern Conference, as we are, guys, 3 weeks away from the NHL trade deadline. It's crazy. I can't believe we are already in the second week of March by the time you guys are watching this, but it is just crazy how things have kind of just flew by here in 2022. So let's get back to it. So the Eastern Conference, we're going to go over the buyers. Now, there's a bunch of buyers. It's a pretty even divide between buyers and sellers at this year's deadline. So in the Eastern Conference, we have the Florida Panthers as a buyer. Now, the Florida Panthers, I think it's pretty obvious why they're a buyer. You look at where they sit right now, top of the Atlantic Division. They've been there throughout pretty much the entire season. Yet you have Tampa kind of nipping at their heels. Toronto's a couple points behind. And that's kind of it. But they're right there. Even Boston, they're 7 points away. There's still another month of hockey to go. So I think the Florida Panthers, if they're looking at an ad, you're probably looking at another top four defenseman. Because right now you've got Mackenzie Weegar and Aaron Ekblad. That's a great top pairing. And then you get to the second pair. And nothing against the guys that are on that second pair. But you've got, if you could add a guy with Gustav Forsling, I think that would be a really nice ad for them. They've been linked to some guys like John Klingberg, Hampus Lindholm, even Jacob Chikrin. I think the Florida Panthers are definitely a team to keep an eye on there. They've got enough forwards. I don't think they're going to do anything there. They could be willing to trade their first-round pick, though. I think they'd have to in some of those trades for Klingberg, Lindholm, and Chikrin. But you get the sense here, right? You're looking for a defenseman as a good puck-moving defenseman, not a big goon guy. They don't need enough. They have a couple of those guys already, right? So the Florida Panthers, that's what I'm expecting from them. The second team is the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs, this makes sense as well. And similar to the Florida Panthers, they're looking for similar stuff. They're looking for a guy on the blue line. Maybe they're a little bit more lenient on if he's a big bruiser defenseman, because they've been linked to guys like Ben Sherratt. But I think if they don't get Ben Sherratt, they've been linked to Lindholm. They've been linked to Klingberg. That's since died. Even Jacob Chikrin, they've been linked to. So I think ideally, if I'm the Leafs, listen, I've looked at their power play. They don't have any more spots for a puck moving defenseman, but they could definitely use another, probably a right shot big defenseman. A guy like Sherratt. I think Sherratt would be a really nice addition there. Even a Mark Giordano. Those are the guys you're looking at. And now that Jake Muzzin is out with an injury, you really have to take a look at that. Because now you're putting a lot more minutes on specifically the penalty kill for guys like Timothy Liljegren, Rasmus Sandin. It's not good for their development, and especially come playoff time, if they're playing Tampa or Florida in the first round, you have to be ready for that. And I think it's going to be important here. It's going to be almost imperative for the Maple Leafs to add another penalty-killing defenseman. They've also been linked to some forwards as well, like Arturi Lehkonen in Montreal. So keep your eye on that kind of stuff. But I think overall their mindset is absolutely to get another big defenseman. Carolina is, again, we're seeing the market for defensemen being pretty much across the board. Carolina here as well, looking for a defenseman. Now, it's interesting, the Hurricanes' defense a lot of it is made up of puck-moving defensemen, yet they want to add more. Apparently, they've been linked to guys like Hampus Lindholm, John Klingberg, the similar suspects, but the Hurricanes' management, Don Waddell, they've been pretty quiet about what they're doing. So we haven't heard a ton of rumors about them. I think there's been a little bit more focus now on extensions for guys like Jesperi Kotkaniemi and Vincent Trocheck, more so than trying to add more pieces. But the Hurricanes, I could definitely see them trading their first round pick. They have a couple of prospects here and there they could move if they really wanted to. So the Hurricanes, definitely a team to watch for as well. The New York Rangers. The Rangers are also a buyer here, and that's no real surprise either. The Rangers are a team that maybe is ahead of schedule, and that may hurt them going into next year. I talked about this with the Ducks as well. Maybe a team that was too good too soon. Too much too fast. And it didn't give enough time for guys to develop. And I think you're seeing that right now with maybe a guy like Capo Caco, who they've got so many good players around. Unfortunately, it makes it harder for the young guys to get in. So does a guy like Caco end up moving? We know Kravtsov is a guy that could end up getting traded because he requested a trade at the beginning of the year because he did not want to report to the Hartford Wolfpack of the AHL. He's been over in Russia throughout the entire season. So the Rangers have assets to give. With that said, they've been linked to a couple of bigger name guys out there. Filip Forsberg has been the most recent name that the Rangers have been tied to. They've been tied to Phil Kessel, Jake DeBrusk up in Boston. They're looking for a middle six winger. Or if they could go for Forsberg, I think they would go for Forsberg as well. So they're looking for another, I would say, playing in the top three lines, they'd like to add another winger. I saw the other day, I think Brad Hunt, or one of those guys was playing for the Rangers in their top six. That's not going to work. You need more stability there. Actually, it might have been Dryden Hunt. So the Rangers are going to look for that. And I think that's an inevitable thing, especially when you're looking at if they're going to move on from Ryan Strome this summer. They're going to need to recoup guys coming back in. So I think the Rangers are going to be wary about trading some guys if they know that they're going to need them potentially as soon as next year. They don't want to mortgage too much of the future for this year. Pittsburgh, kind of in a similar boat. Pittsburgh said they are not willing to trade their first round pick this year in 2022. It's supposed to be a deeper first round. Maybe not as strong at the top, but a deep first round. So I think Pittsburgh wants to keep their pick. I think they realize there's an opportunity here for a successful season. They beat the Rangers a couple weeks ago during the weekend. Shut them out at home. Tristan Jarry's been great this season. So I could see the Penguins going for more of a middle tier player. There's been rumors that they may trade Kasperi Kapanen. There's been rumors about the summer that could be in store for the Penguins. I'm actually making a video about that next. The Penguins are going to be interesting because I think a lot of what they do at the deadline this year is going to be foretelling for what they're going to do this summer in particular. When you've got guys like Letang, Brian Rust, all up for extensions. Even Evan Rodriguez, are they sold on him long-term after one good season? That's the kind of stuff that we're going to start to figure out here toward the deadline because they start bringing in guys like Filip Forsberg and big-name guys. You kind of know they're going to go with those guys instead, and they're going to let the other guys walk in free agency. So that's kind of what you're looking at with the Penguins. Washington, I think, is going to be in a similar spot in the sense that they're not going to want to mortgage too much of their future. They've mortgaged a lot of it already. Unless they're willing to trade their first round pick or a Connor McMichael, really the only other assets out there, it sounds like, are Michael Kempny and Vitek Vanacek. So I don't really know if Washington's going to go for that big swinging move. They've been tied. I just made a video about this. They've been tied to some gritty middle six guys, not afraid to get their hands dirty. Guys like Andrew Kopp, Kalle Järnkrok, who has been in Seattle this season. Really, he was a good player in Nashville for a while. I'm trying to remember the third name. I completely forgot. Hold on a sec. I have it here. Andrew Kopp, Kalle Järnkrok, and Arturi Lehkonen up in Montreal. So those are, again, it kind of fits the mold for that kind of middle six grinder guy. So I could see that being a fit. So that's it for the buyers. So buyers, we've got 6 buyers in the Eastern Conference. Now we're going to go to neutral teams. So the first one is Boston. Boston, I think, is in a weird spot. Again, it seems like all these teams are, right? But I think Boston is in a sort of identity crisis. They lost David Krejci last season. They lost Zdeno Chara, their captain, 2 years ago. They lost Torrey Krug. They've lost Tuukka Rask. And the only guys really left are Marchand and Bergeron from that sort of era. So, and Bergeron needs a new contract this summer. So, I don't know what you do if you're the Bruins. Do you say, all right, this is our last window, and you end up seeing Cam Neely kind of just go balls to the wall going for it this year and picking up a goaltender, picking up another defenseman? They could use a top six forward. There's a lot of things that's not perfect in Boston. Yet the thing is, with where they're at in the Eastern Conference, there's 2 wildcard spots right now that they're kind of jockeying for. And they're 7 points back of the top team, the Panthers, in the conference. Yet there's like a dozen points between them and the team that's out, the first team out of the playoffs, which is the Red Wings. So Boston's pretty safe in terms of making the playoffs as of right now. I would say it's pretty comfortable. But there's still a lot of questions about, what the Bruins do here. It's going to play into what they do moving forward. So if you're bringing in money, that may mean that there's problems or could be complications with signing Bergeron this summer. So that's the kind of stuff I would look at if I'm the Bruins. But they have a lot of holes that they need to fill. Tampa Bay. Now, Tampa Bay is sort of the opposite. I'm not really worried about them staying neutral because I think Tampa Bay is a playoff team. They're the defending Stanley Cup champions times 2. They've won 2 back-to-back cups here. Likely not going to win the cup this year, but you never know. We've seen dynasties like this in the past. There's been some things, though, like the John Cooper getting thrown out of the game. There's some little things here and there that you're like, okay, like what's going on there? They had a slow start to this season. Is this the same Tampa we've seen? And obviously it's not, but I think it's going to be interesting with how they handle their situation. Because ideally, I think Julian Breezeball has said, we're content with our team and we're not going to make moves. You know what the problem is, though? The second you become content, you stop pushing yourself forward, which I think is a dangerous spot. Because we've seen this before. Right? Perfect example, real life example. Right? You've been working out, getting into shape, and then you stop working out. You're like, I look like a bodybuilder. I'm going to stop working out. You're content. And then you stop working out, and then 3 months later, you're starting to look like you were again. Maybe a year later, right? So that's what I'm trying to say is I think Tampa Bay has to be careful with how content they are with their team. I know they want to keep draft picks. I know they can't continue to just move draft picks year after year, but they're one of those teams now that can get guys in free agency. They can get guys if they want them. Guys want to go down to Florida, no state tax, play with a really good hockey team. So I think that's something that they do have in their favor. Ottawa is more of the sense that I'm okay with them, the next 2 teams that are neutral, because they're still developing. And there are teams that don't want to trade away more players. Now, I think they will have to trade guys. I think Nick Paul's been in the mix for guys that could get moved out. Yeah, we've also heard some rumors about guys that could come in. Jacob Chikrin is a name that was linked once, but I have seen that rumor. So I'm kind of running with that. But I thought that was definitely interesting. It's good that they're looking at those guys, though. I think Pierre Dorian's doing his due diligence by at least looking at those players. They've been tied to guys like Dylan Strome, maybe even a guy like Kevin Fiala up in Minnesota. So I think the Senators are kind of in a cross spot right now where they could be buyers going for maybe not this year's playoffs, but going for the future to get better. And we could also see them maybe looking at just maybe moving out some of the guys like Nick Paul that aren't going to be there in their future, get some depth draft picks, and then go big game hunting this summer. The New Jersey Devils, very similar spot. I think the Devils, it would be smart not to pull the plug on everything. But they've got some core pieces there. They've got the 2 big centers, Hughes and Hischier. They've got Dougie Hamilton. But other than that, you start to wonder, well, how good is Damon Severson? How good is guys like Miles Wood? How good's Pavel Zacha? He's due for a contract this year. Does Zacha get traded at the deadline? That was a big topic last week. So the Devils are kind of, I think, trying to evaluate where they fit in terms of the pecking order going even into next season. So I think it's going to go a little bit more off of that if you're the Devils. Now we move on to the Sellers. So Sellers is a pretty big list. We've got 6 teams that are sellers. So the first one is the Blue Jackets. Now, the Blue Jackets, I was on the verge of putting them as a neutral team, but then there's been rumors that they might move out Alex Texier. We've already known about the rumors about Max Domi. They'd definitely like to trade him. And I could see them trading Jack Roslovic. Now, it sounds like Patrick Laine is safe. Jarmo Kekalainen just kind of stood up for him the other day, so I don't see that trade happening here too soon. But the Blue Jackets, I think, will be sellers. Korpisalo could also be on his way out. So I think the Blue Jackets are more likely than not, they will be sellers. They're not a playoff team this year, and they're going to kind of just continue the process of this rebuild that they're currently going under. Moving just down the road, really, the Detroit Red Wings. I think the Red Wings will be sellers. Maybe soft sellers, kind of similar to Columbus in the sense that they won't be selling off their big, we're not going to see any of the big guys move, but there aren't really any real big pieces there. And again, we've seen guys like Lucas Raymond, Mo Seider. Those guys are really bright spots for this team. But if we see guys like Thomas Greiss get traded, don't be too surprised there. Nick Leddy. We've heard some rumors about Tyler Bertuzzi. I think that's more of Yzerman kind of playing the Anthony Mantha card from last season, right? He doesn't want to trade Anthony Mantha, but if you're going to give me a first-round pick, Jacob Vrana, and some depth players, I'll do that deal. I think that's kind of what they're looking at here for Bertuzzi. They don't want to trade Bertuzzi, but there's a price there if you're willing to pony it up. I think that's where they're at. The New York Islanders. Now, this one's really frustrating because the Islanders, I almost put them as a neutral team because I don't know what Lou Lamoriello is thinking. And nobody really does, let's be honest. Nobody knows what Lou's thinking. But Lou could be the guy that he makes the big trades that you least expect. Now, I've heard some rumors, maybe Brock Nelson to Minnesota. I don't think that's happening. I think Josh Bailey is more likely. But even Josh Bailey, Cal Clutterbuck, I don't think there's going to be much market for Matt Martin. He's still got another year on his contract. Semyon Varlamov, same thing. He has another year on his contract. But you can't tell me a team like the Oilers wouldn't probably take a swing at him. A team that's a playoff team this year gets another year out of him next year. I think there will be teams interested in Varley. Some other guys. I mean, I don't want the Islanders to trade Parise. I think he's been really good for the Islanders. But with where the team is at, you're gonna have to bring up the young guys. He's gonna take away minutes from the young guys like Bellows and Wahlstrom. So I could see a guy like Parise moving. There's even been rumors Scott Mayfield, Zdeno Chara, obviously. Cal Clutterbuck, I think I mentioned him. So all those kind of guys for the Islanders. The names we've already talked about pretty in depth. The Islanders are going to have to get younger here. They're one of the I think they might be the oldest team in the NHL right now. They kind of invested in older guys. Kyle Palmieri is also a guy to throw out there. But again, the Islanders are looking to move out cap space for older contracts they signed. And it's not going to be cheap. I think it's going to be difficult for the Islanders to move out those big boy contracts. All right, so moving on, the Flyers. Again, similar situation. The Flyers were expecting to be a good team this year, maybe even a contender in the playoffs, and that did not work out. Now, the good news for the Flyers is they have some bigger name guys that have contracts expiring this summer. They could get themselves out from under potentially a big Rasmus Ristolainen contract. They could get, Claude Giroux, some value there. So there's some good stuff there. Martin Jones could be on his way out. They could even move some of their bigger contracts. Travis Konechny has definitely generated some interest. JVR, would teams like to take James Van Riemsdyk? Justin Braun. Those are the kind of guys you could see the Flyers move. Those are actually some pretty big pieces. The Flyers could get significant value for those guys. Now, maybe they're not the Chychrins or the Lindholms or the Klingbergs of the world, but they're good players that are right behind them. They're secondary guys behind that. And you could argue Giroux is probably one of the best centers or forwards at the very least, if you consider him a center or not at this point. One of the best forwards available in this market. The Buffalo Sabres, I was almost going to put them as a neutral team because I don't think they're going to go too crazy with making moves. And Buffalo, I think, is kind of like Ottawa, where it's like, please don't beat it up anymore. It's already beat to a pulp. So, again, I think Buffalo is going to keep things pretty much the same. We could see some depth guys like Cody Eakin get traded out. I've heard rumors about Victor Olofsson, but I think that's a little bit of a stretch. But that's kind of what you're looking at for the Sabres. The Montreal Canadiens, they will be going big game selling. Not hunting, selling. And I think they're in store for a big summer, which I'll make a video about that. I already made a video about that. That video did extremely well. But I think the Habs are trying to make some cap space this summer so Jeff Gorton and their staff, Kent Hughes, can go out and sign a big player, whether that's Fleury, Patrice Bergeron, Chris Letang. They could get their guy, and they could start this era off in Montreal on what they believe would be the right foot with their guy. And I think there's reason to believe that the Habs could move on from some of their bigger contracts. Jeff Petrie, Brendan Gallagher. Do I see a Carey Price trade right now? No, I don't think. I think that ship has sailed. I think his injury history has made him pretty much untradeable. Who else is available? Rental-wise, Ben Sherratt, Arturi Lehkonen. There are some pretty good names up in Montreal that could be dealt for some pretty good assets. Even we've heard about Mike Hoffman, who's got a couple years left on his deal. Toffoli already got traded out of Montreal. So the Habs are looking to clear cap space. For what? Probably to make some moves this summer. So I definitely think Montreal will be looking to move out as much cap space as possible. So that is it for the Eastern Conference. It was a pretty even split. We had 6 buyers, 6 sellers, and 4 neutral teams. That's a pretty even split. Now the Western Conference is pretty similar. So we look at the buyers in the Western Conference. Colorado. I think Colorado is the safest team in the NHL right now. They're currently the team in first place, I guess you could say, to get the President's Trophy, which is first place in the league, the most points in the NHL by the end of the season. Colorado, I think, is looking to make moves, though. I don't think Joe Sakic has been too shy about his interest in adding a goaltender. I think they're still looking to add another center. Some more forwards. I've heard that they've looked at Claude Giroux extensively. They've looked at Giroux. They've been looking all over the place. I think they've got their eye on a couple of different players. They were looking at Pavelski, I think, for a while. So I think Colorado could definitely be a player at the deadline, adding another big forward and potentially adding at least a depth goaltender, just somebody behind Darcy Kemper. St. Louis is the next team, and I have St. Louis here as a soft buyer, but I think St. Louis could come out with a big punch here. The reason I say that, I think St. Louis is in sort of a win-now spot of their own. Now, I think they've looked at defensemen. I think they'd like to add somebody alongside Parayko, Falk, Krug. You add a guy like Ben Sherratt or Mark Giordano. I think those would be some really good fits there for the St. Louis Blues. Big, blue-collared, red-nosed defensemen. I think would really be a good fit for the Blues. I think they've got their scoring figured out. They've got Buchnevich's depth. I mean, they've got Jordan Kyrou, who kind of came onto the scene. I think the Blues are pretty well set up front. I think they would like to add another defenseman. That's my take on the Blues. Minnesota is kind of weird in the sense that I don't know how sold Bill Guerin is into this season. Is he going to mortgage the future by trading a first-round pick this year for a rental? I don't see that happening. I think he's looking at more of, if he could get a guy that's got another year on his contract, I think he would be more inclined to that. And I think that's why he's looked at guys with multiple years left on their contract. A guy like Josh Bailey on the Islanders, Brock Nelson on the Islanders. Guys with a little bit more term, teams looking to move out cap space. I could see Minnesota going after those guys. They're willing to trade the first-round pick. They have the prospects. It's make sure we're going to get more than just 3 months out of this guy. I think that's where Bill Guerin is at. The Calgary Flames have already announced they are a buyer by making a big trade, bringing in Tyler Toffoli to add to their forward depth. I think that was a great addition to their team, and it doesn't really change the mindset too much of what they're going to do at the deadline. I think they'd still like to look at having a return for Mark Giordano to the Calgary Flames in a deal with the Kraken. I think that's definitely on the table. They may look to add another depth winger or forward in that bottom six. I think that's definitely on the table, kind of fitting Daryl Sutter's mindset. I could definitely see that happen. Jacob Markstrom's been really good this year. I think they're going to keep the goaltending the same. Like I said, I think you're looking at more depth pieces now instead of that big name top six forward. They already got that into Foley, so they got a big piece of the work done. It's just a matter of what is next. I think it's going to be depth, lesser name players coming into the Flames, but they could still make a significant impact come playoff time. And I also have the Golden Knights as a buyer. That is the last buyer on my Western Conference list. And the reason Vegas is here is they're pretty much a team that needs to win. Like, their window is now. But they don't necessarily have, A, the cap space, or B, really the roster place to bring anybody else in. So the reason I say they're a buyer is a goaltender. With Robin Lehner out for the rest of the regular season, it's going to be the Laurent Brossoit show. And whatever the guys they have coming up from Henderson. So I think I could see the Golden Knights going after somebody that could be a starting goalie caliber. The problem is, what are you looking at? I mean, you could look at Varlamov of the Islanders. I think there's be interest there, absolutely. They've looked, I think they looked at Fleury and quickly got a no. That's not happening. Trying to think who else could be out there. Now, what's interesting is, what about Ilya Samsonov in Washington? I know the Capitals maybe don't want to move him. Again, they could move him if they get somebody back. And I think that's what you're looking at if they were to do that. But again, that's kind of more just a pie-in-the-sky thought. And would probably involve a third team to make that trade work because Washington needs a goalie. So that's it. We have 5 buyers in the Western Conference. Kind of interesting. And you'll get why there's a lot of neutral teams here. So we have a lot more neutral teams. We had 4 neutral teams in the Eastern Conference. We have 6 here. So we have the LA Kings. Hold on a sec, guys. Sorry about that. All right, so let's get back into it. So looking at the neutral teams, we have 6 neutral teams. And the reason for that is the California teams. Of course, the California teams have to ruin this, right? So, the first one is the LA Kings. The LA Kings I'm considering them neutral because I don't think they're ready to mortgage the future at this deadline. And what I mean by that is I don't think you're going to see them go after any rentals. I don't see them trading a first-round pick for a rental. I just don't see it. I think the LA Kings are in a spot right now. They're right in that playoff chase. But again, I think with where things are right now, with where Dallas, Anaheim, and Vancouver, the first 3 teams out of the playoffs, they're likely not going to be truly competitive. So for the Kings to go out there and trade their first round pick and trade another prospect and trade this and trade that, you're not going to see that. And that's why we're hearing a lot of talk about them going after a guy like Jacob Chikrin in Arizona, because if you're going to give up the prospects, they want a guy that's going to be there for a couple years. And that's why I think that makes sense. So I don't see the LA Kings going all the way through. I don't see them maybe they'll get somebody here and there. I don't think they'll be selling at the deadline either. They're going to keep their guys as their own rentals. So I think the Kings are going to be pretty stagnant at this deadline. Nashville. So the Predators. The Predators are, again, a team that I look at in the sense that Nashville they're doing well this season. They were actually first in the Central Division back in December. But the problem is they've slipped up a little bit, and there's still the sense out there that this team isn't as good as we all think they are. And if they go and mortgage the future, trading a first-round pick this year or something like that, it may be more detrimental for what they're actually going to accomplish in the playoffs. Because are the Predators, honestly, are the Predators one piece away? I don't think so. I think they're still at least a good 2-3 pieces away from being a legit contender. And the problem is, if they make the playoffs, I could see them doing what they've done in years past, which is make the playoffs, they get those playoff tickets, those 3 or 4 home dates, and that's it. And they're done. They do not win the playoff series and move forward. So That's something that the Predators are going to have to figure out. I know they've looked at some guys in particular, but I just don't know if the Predators are going to go all the way through with that. The Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Edmonton Oilers should be a buyer. And the thing with the Oilers is they are a team that is kind of desperate. Like, they are a dog up against the wall, like caught in a corner and kind of getting snippy and barking back. Because the Oilers cannot afford to miss the playoffs this year. And they're 1 point away from doing so. They have played 55 games. Dallas has played 53. They're the first team out of the playoffs. They are 1 point back. So that does not leave a lot of room for error down the stretch for the Oilers. I could see the Oilers going after another depth winger into their bottom six, and they absolutely need a goaltender. Whether that's Semyon Varlamov or that's a guy like Anton Khudobin, I don't know who it is, but they've got to get a goalie because this is a huge problem for the Oilers. I think it's more of a testament to maybe their defense not being that good either. So they need to fix some things on the blue line. So I don't know. I think the Oilers are one of those teams, they're going to dangerously just go with the wind and kind of see how it goes. I think that's going to end up doing them more harm than good. And I don't know. The Oilers are just such a frustrating franchise. It is just incredible how good they started this season back in really until the end of November. Right after Thanksgiving, this team just tanked. Really, really frustrating. Dallas. Now, Dallas is more, I would almost say, a buyer. And here's why I say that. So they're currently talking to Joe Pavelski about an extension. So that's good. So they aren't going to likely trade him at this point. John Klingberg's on his way out, but I think that's more of just him and the team not really being on the best terms. But even if John Klingberg leaves, they still have a really good team. And chances are, if they trade Klingberg, they could still get something back for him. Maybe not the most value now that he's requested a trade and everything else, but I think Dallas could get something there. And I like what they've got. Ideally, if they could, they'd probably move Holtby, they'd move Radulov, and they're not a playoff team right now. Like, they're right on the outside of the playoffs, but they're not a playoff team, so it does leave you kind of wondering, like, where do things stand? And the problem is that, well, the good thing is the teams above them are Nashville and Vegas. And Vegas is a playoff team, in my opinion, but Nashville, they could take Nashville out of that spot. Edmonton, they could take them out if they get into a wild card situation. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens with the Dallas Stars. Winnipeg has gotten extremely interesting here because there's been rumors that Mark Scheifele could be on his way out. And there's been rumors Andrew Kopp, a couple of other guys around that team could be moving. Now, again, the Jets are out of the playoff picture. They are 7 points out of a playoff spot. I could see the Jets going out maybe as a soft seller. I think they're going to make more moves this summer. I could see them moving a guy like Andrew Kopp at the deadline and maybe one or two other guys, but other than that, I think they're going to be pretty neutral. I don't think they're going to go too off the rails here. San Jose is also going to go neutral. And the reason I say San Jose will go neutral, and again, they're actually in a worse spot. They're 10 points out of a playoff spot from their bitter rivals in Vegas. But San Jose is kind of they have a problem where they have so many big contracts that are anchoring them down. They can't be a rebuilding team with those guys. They're not good enough where they could be a playoff team, but they're not bad enough where they could just tank. I think that is the worst spot to be in, and I think that's where the Sharks are at right now. This Tomas Hertl thing is going to play a huge role in that. If they re-sign Tomas Hertl, huge win for them. Do they move out some contracts like Timo Meier? I don't know what their mindset is on some of those guys. Even Tomas Hertl, like, you don't bring back Hertl, you save some cap space in doing that. So that's something that definitely, I think the Sharks are going to go more toward just, all right, let's kind of try and keep things together and wait till the summer to figure out. But I think Hertl will be more of a, they need to figure that out by the deadline. We'll know about Hertl here in the next week or two. So now to finish this video off, we have the sellers at this year's trade deadline. And we've got 5 of them for you. So the first one is the Anaheim Ducks. And what's so weird about the Ducks is they really are a playoff Vegas-esque team. Right now, they are 3 points out of a playoff spot. Same amount of games played as Vegas. Why aren't they a playoff team? Well, they have some big pending free agent contracts that, unlike a team like Pittsburgh, could just say, all right, well, if we lose Rust or Letang this summer, it doesn't end us, right? Or Malkin, it's not the end of the world. Anaheim can't do that. And they've got some big ones. Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson, and Rickard Rakell. The Ducks can't afford to lose those 3 guys for nothing. Even if they lost one of them for nothing, it would really hurt. So for Pat Verbeek, he has already pretty much decided, I think, Hampus Lindholm and Rakell will be gone. Manson, I think, is still a little bit more on the table. And there's been even rumors recently. Guys like Maxime Comtois could be traded. I think the Ducks are going to do a little bit of a reset here with their new management. And I think that we're going to see some really... I think that we could see a pretty active deadline by the Anaheim Ducks this year. The Vancouver Canucks are next. The reason I think the Canucks will be sellers is they've got some big decisions to make. They've got a lot of money that they have to re-sign this year if they want to keep some of these UFAs. Brock Besser, a restricted free agent. JT Miller is an unrestricted free agent next year, but he is a big-name player. He might even be a Hart Trophy finalist for MVP of his team. Like, he has been that good for the Canucks. There's been talk about some of the other guys, even lesser guys, like Nils Höglander. Excuse me. Falling asleep in this video. But there's a lot of things that the Canucks could do. Look at the blue line. They've maybe looking to move some money out with Tyler Myers. They may be looking to move out Luke Shen as a rental. So there's definitely a lot that the Canucks can do. Again, a team that I think is going to be fairly active at this year's deadline. And Jim Rutherford there, along with Patrick Alvin, I think they will be definitely looking to make some noise in their first season up in Vancouver. Chicago will also be a seller. Chicago may be less of a seller than I think they will be. I don't think they'll be as active as Anaheim or Vancouver. But Chicago could move Dylan Strome, Calvin DeHaan. I don't even think they're going to move a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury. I think they're going to be pretty status quo with how they approach this deadline. Davidson was literally just named the GM last week or earlier this week. So he doesn't even have a month to officially say, all right, this is what we're doing as the authority. I know he's been there as an interim basis, but it's a little bit different. So yeah, that's going to be, I think they gave him the authority because I think the shelf dropped. He needs the authority here at the deadline to actually make some moves. I think that's why they did that as well. Seattle's definitely a seller at the deadline. Again, kind of the same extent as Chicago. Like, is it Marc-Andre Fleury, Kalle Järnkrok, and that's it? Kind of like, I don't really think we're going to see Seattle in their first year here. Like, they took a lot more contracts that were going to be longer term, like the Jordan Eberles. They've signed Philip Grubauer in free agency. Like, they kind of went the longer term approach with their core, Jaden Schwartz. So they don't really have a ton of rentals this year, and I think that will benefit them longer term. It's just right now, I don't think they will be seeing a super active fireworks like trade deadline. And then finally, to end this video, it's been a long time. I don't think I have enough oxygen in my brain. The Arizona Coyotes. So the Coyotes will definitely be a seller. I don't think anybody's too, you're not going to see much debate there. But to what extent is Jacob Chikrin getting traded? That makes things a lot bigger for the Coyotes. Or, Phil Kessel, Christian Fischer, Lawson Krause. There's a lot of names being thrown around the Coyotes. I could see the Coyotes either being one of the most disappointing teams at the deadline, making like 1 or 2 moves, or setting off fireworks and maybe doing double that, maybe 5 or 6 moves at the deadline. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Coyotes work this, but I think they will definitely be a seller. They're looking to clear more cap space, bring maybe on some more money in order to maybe get some more draft picks, kind of like they did last year. So we'll see what happens with that. But guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.